For the first time, a suspected murderer could pay the price for a state Supreme Court ruling that put hundreds of cold cases back into play.
News 13 recently highlighted the case that undid the old statute of limitations law. That Supreme Court ruling has now given prosecutors the green light to go after a man in the brutal murder of an elderly woman back in the 1980s. Amanda Goodman reports.
She was a very special lady.
Connie Peterson's dear friend, 74-year-old Thelma Kline, was found murdered in her home on May 3rd, 1989. She suffocated after a robber left her bound and gagged on her bedroom floor.
It was such a shock to everybody to think that here this gentle, kind lady who had no enemies would all of a sudden be gone just like that.
With no leads or suspects, the case turned cold.
After the first 5-6 years and nothing occurred, I just kind of put it to the back of my mind and thought there would never be a closure. We'd never know what happened.
In 2007, Sergeant Josh Lano, then a detective, reopened the case.
It's the only case that I ever worked that when you went home at night you thought about. And it was on my desk for 19 months.
Because DNA profiling did not exist 20 years ago, Sergeant Lano sent evidence found at the crime scene to the state lab.
The very last piece of evidence that we submitted came back with a DNA profile which was entered into the CODA system, which ultimately came back to Mr. Jimmy Lee.
That was last August. At the time, 47-year-old Jimmy Lee was sitting in jail in Grants.
Ultimately, Mr. Lee gave a full soul confession to the crime and other things that nobody else would know unless you were there.
With the DNA match and confession, Lano called Thelma's family to tell them the good news.
There's a family that for 20 years, had probably given up hope, and to be able to give them that call and say, hey, we've got him. It's quite emotional.
But the emotional roller coaster ride wasn't done yet.
When they came to us, we looked at the law concerning the case, and at the time the statute of limitations was 15 years.
Prosecutors' hands were tied until June, when the state Supreme Court ruled the 15-year statute of limitations no longer applies to first-degree felonies committed between 1982 and 1997, the year when lawmakers got rid of the time limit on prosecuting those crimes. Now, it's just a matter of time before Jimmy Lee faces a judge for the murder of Thelma Kline.
I am just delighted that at last, finally, we're going to have some closure for Thelma. Even after 21 years, you don't forget those quiet, calm, loving things that she did for us.
In Farmington, Amanda Goodman, KRQE News 13.
And again, that murder was in Farmington. The San Juan County District Attorney's Office is now waiting for the case to be officially sent back to district court before proceeding with it. Jimmy Lee is in prison on an aggravated battery conviction.